before you even think about implementation and how things will be implemented. You need to know why and what you're trying to change. The more complicated the roles are for the end users, the more the UX UI design can kind of play into it and make their lives easier to increase the productivity.
Welcome to Salesforce Radio, your destination for insights, news, and community connections within the dynamic Salesforce ecosystem.
Welcome to the podcast. Very excited to have Maria Rajpoot here from Credera today. Maria, thanks for joining.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a pleasure. You know, we've gotten to know each other a little bit just from speaking and from some events, and likewise with some of the members of my team. But very excited today to have you on here in Salesforce Radio to get a little bit of your background, a little bit of the story of how you got to where you are today, and really anything you want to share with the ecosystem. So if you don't mind maybe giving a little bit of an introduction, that'd be a great place to start.
Yeah, sure. So I got into Salesforce unplanned. Well, the career was unplanned. I didn't ever actually think about having a career in tech, let alone Salesforce in the beginning. So the first time I ever actually encountered Salesforce or got to know it, that was back in 2006. And I think back in those days, it used to be just plain old Sales Cloud, which no concept of Salesforce administrator or BA or anything. It was more like, yes, a bit of an administrative user, someone who would go and create reports and dashboards and support the sales team, who are kind of like the primary users of Salesforce. And of course, I had no idea what Salesforce or where would it take me, 18 years ago now. Yeah, 18 years down the line. I think in between, of course, I worked for some other companies and different jobs as well. But majority of my career, even in the beginning, planned or unplanned, it just happened that I ended up working in the ecosystem, one job after another. I started off from marketing. I started working as a marketing assistant and then market analyst, moved slightly into kind of data analysis side of things and reporting, again, using the marketing data or accessing databases, using SQL queries, pulling out the data, using it for different marketing campaigns. So kind of an extension of marketing, or I would say bridging that gap between marketing and tech. And that just happened that, it turned out to be that doorway or that passage to kind of move me unconsciously into the tech industry. And here I am now after going through admin roles, BA, worked as a project manager as well previously, managed teams at couple of different places in my previous workplaces, and I've implemented multiple end-to-end projects within Salesforce, experience across multiple clouds, and now working as a business success consultant.
Well, that's a great summary, but I definitely want to dive deeper in a little bit. I always love these stories, and it's always so fun to hear how many people kind of are that accidental admin. I mean, of course, you're saying you kind of came to it before the admin role even existed and kind of encountered the system. But what was so you said you came from a marketing background. Were you in a marketing role when you were first introduced to Salesforce?
It was kind of a bit of marketing and reporting. It was like a job, in fact, that I was doing alongside my university degree. So it wasn't even, I didn't even think of it at the time that this is where my career starts. It was just a job that I happened to get into. But yes, I think after graduating, my first few roles were all around marketing, working as marketing assistant, marketing executive, and positions in that area. Yeah.
When did you, I guess, realize, hey, marketing isn't really for me. I'm kind of going this other direction?
That's the thing. I didn't. I didn't. No. Like I said, I think the pathway just happened to be that one of the roles early in the years where I was working, they didn't have enough support from the IT team, and the marketing team needed someone who could use the database and, who could use just SQL queries and pull out the data and create the segments that they needed for, sending out the direct mail campaigns at the time that it was. So they just happened to offer me a 1-week course on SQL, and I was like, yeah, that's fine. I can do that. And I kind of learned on the job after that course, practiced my SQL skills, and just took more and more responsibility on that side. And from there onward, I think the next few roles that I had were, again, involving SQL queries, writing, accessing databases, creating the segments, not even using Marketing Cloud. That didn't exist back then either. But again, using the system in the back end, creating different reports, even analyzing data as well. And that just kind of paved slowly the way for me to get kind of deeper into the tech side of Salesforce without me thinking that this isn't for me, or this is, how I'm going to have the transition. And it's very unconscious.
So it's really interesting. So one of the skills that you basically were given, which ended up bringing you into kind of the Salesforce ecosystem, is, being able to learn how to pull up those SQL queries. Today, obviously, there's been a lot of tools made and a lot of improvements made within Salesforce. So a lot of the ways that people did things in the past aren't necessarily, so relevant at this point. But I'm sure for a while, those skills, were important and really were giving you what you needed to be able to get started, at least, with taking the data and being able to do something with it, which is always really the, sometimes the forgotten end goal, right? In organizations, a lot of times we see people who are living inside the system and they're forgetting about, what this data is going to do at the end of the day. They're sort of getting stuck in the configurations and the automations. They're forgetting that at some point, someone's going to want to sit down and say, okay, what do we have here? What is going on? What is our organization actually doing? And today, obviously, there's a lot of tools for that. But when you got started, Salesforce was sort of in its infancy before the App Exchange, I believe. I think it came out around that time, maybe a little bit later even, and probably took a while for anything to be on there. How long had that organization been on Salesforce when you joined?
So where I learned SQL, that organization wasn't even using Salesforce. That was just, that wasn't really part of my Salesforce roles. But the one that I joined after that, I think they had been using Salesforce for a couple of years, but they needed someone who has the understanding of the database, the data model, familiar with it, and who can, use SQL as well to kind of extract the data in the background and kind of wear multiple hats. I think that is one thing which has been common across pretty much most of my roles, is that I've always worn multiple hats. Maybe that's because that I've never been, right, I'm just going to go on the marketing side, or I'm just going to go on the tech side and become a developer, or, picking up another path for myself. I've always just kind of taken on whatever comes my way as a challenge and kind of learned more things on the go and improved from there onwards without thinking kind of too much like, where is this going to take me, or is this even relevant for me or not? And, you said how skills may or may not be even relevant much later down the line, but I think exactly those SQL skills came in handy when 5 years ago I worked for another company where they were using Marketing Cloud, and they needed someone with SQL skills to be able to create the automations. And had I not had that experience, I don't think I would have had the job, because, prior to that, I had no Marketing Cloud experience. So that was my kind of edge to land that role as well. So I think it does pay off. No matter what skills you're learning along your, along your career, along your path, somehow later on or sooner or later, they will all feed into your kind of, I would say, progression or success as well.
I think there's such a truth to that. And sometimes we think, oh, I'm just staying busy to, pass the time, or I'm just staying busy to get to this next phase in life or whatever it may be. But oftentimes we realize that, oh my gosh, that busyness, that time that I was really working, and then I kind of, everything outside of being busy was a bit of a haze. And that's where we actually progress the most and open up the most opportunities for the future. And I think we see that a lot in this line of work, right? Where people are just, going through a really busy period, and then all of a sudden, there's a change happens, whether it's, a product change or a personal change. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, I can't believe how much I accomplished when I was so, incredibly busy and working these 3 different, consulting jobs and all of that kind of stuff. So where have you spent most of your time? Have you spent it mostly as part of a team, working within the Salesforce system, or were you working mostly as a consultant? What's been the kind of the breakdown of your career look like?
I think it's a mix and match, I would say. So consultancy has been more in the recent years, like the last 3-4 years. Prior to that, I've only ever worked for end users. Having said that, I think if you think about the role of a consultant, it is essentially to liaise with the business, with the stakeholders, understand their requirements, kind of translate those requirements from plain English into, let's call it Salesforce language, so the developers understand it, and be that bridge between the tech team and the business. And even though my consultancy role has only been the last 3-4 years, that role itself, like what I've just described, I think that's been part of my positions, and even prior to that as well, even when I was working for end users. The 2-3 positions prior to the consultancy ones have been where I am liaising with the businesses, understanding, what is it that they want, Where is it that they're trying to get to? How does Salesforce fit into that and can help them achieve their objectives? And then guiding them with, what features we can implement, what we can prioritize, and taking that to the tech teams and then helping them implement it. And I think that has, played a major role in my position where I am as of today, because these are, like, I keep talking about this, but soft skills are not going to go anywhere. No AI is going to take over soft skills. If you know how to speak to people, if you know how to understand the requirements, if you can understand and, have that, enthusiasm to just quickly pick up and jump into a new industry and, get yourself familiarized with the lingo, with the terminologies, and, get your hands on dirty with understanding what the business objectives are and actually put yourself there. That does help and that does feed into it. And that's exactly what businesses need, regardless of whether you're working as a consultant or not.
I think that's really true. And it's always fun within this ecosystem to see kind of the ability to move from consulting to in-house to consulting and going back and forth, bringing those skills. And I think that really enriches a lot of, the solutioning that people are doing within the space, because pretty much everyone's got the experience of working as for the end user, or working for an organization that uses Salesforce. Tell me about some of the projects. You mentioned some end-to-end projects that you've done. What's been projects, I guess, that you've really enjoyed? What have been challenges? What's been maybe your longest project?
Challenge. This has got me thinking. I think the challenges with every project, some small, some easily overcome, some not so much. I feel challenges don't come with the technicality of the project itself, but more with depending on the people involved on the project. And there will always be people who are either not so like tech friendly, or not too much kind of bought into the idea of using or implementing Salesforce, especially with the greenfield implementations. They always have reservations. And I feel, and I somehow find joy in that as well. But, explaining people of, what Salesforce is and what it can actually do, and then kind of delivering that result as well, and having them, or kind of, showing them over time of, this is what your reservations were, hearing them out, because I feel these are like therapy sessions with business stakeholders every time when you start talking to them and they're like, no, we want this, Salesforce can't do this, or we want this, no one understands us. And I tend to just be there for, just listening and understanding what their needs are. And I think that's exactly what a consultant should do as well. Just be, yes, of course, you need to wear that technical hat as well, but listen and understand what the problems are, where the pain points are. Let them know that you've understood it and obviously work towards it. And I think that just really helps overcome challenges. And I've seen people behaviors changing, over the period of 3 months, 6 months. Yes, of course, it takes time. And there's no magic pill to, here you go, Salesforce has delivered everything, but it takes time, but it takes effort from the whole team, not just one person, to build that trust into the system as well, and have that system built in a way that it delivers results and it helps teams. And I think that's a common challenge, I would say, in pretty much most of my projects. Of course, some people can be more difficult to deal with than others. But that's part of the joy, Like one of the reasons for me to get into marketing was to kind of understand the psychology side of human behavior, why people behave certain ways. And I thought, well, marketing helps me with that, because you're kind of understanding and observing the behavior and you're taking actions based on that. And even though I'm not really in marketing anymore, I think I'm still kind of using that and implementing it even in consultancy, because even when you're talking to people day to day, that's exactly what it is. And I think all people need is just someone to be there to listen to them, understand them, and then, be there genuinely to add value to what you're doing. If your focus is always to add value, you will always always deliver positive results.
I think I resonate with a lot of that, and thinking about, I speak to a lot of people who either have implemented Salesforce recently or implementing Salesforce or have been using Salesforce for a long time. Obviously, there's things in common with many of them, but one thing that you can tell, or I can tell right away when I get on a call, and I say, okay, where are you at in your Salesforce journey? And I can tell just by the way they answer if they're A, really happy with Salesforce, B, not happy, or C, still on the fence about the investment that's been made up until now and about the investment going forward. And it really comes down to, okay, who did the implementation and how did they do it? Because there are a lot of really great partners out there to do implementations and that take time to go through all the due diligence and the user stories and understanding what everyone's been doing until now, rather than saying, this is Salesforce, this is your industry, this is the solution you need for it, and convincing, hey, this is the gold standard industry solution, without the client really understanding that actually there's a lot of room for customization, for doing things the right way. And I think, listen, of course, timeline plays into that. You have people with unrealistic expectations, and they end up, cheating themselves because in the future it's going to cost them more time. But I think even beyond that, you also see the idea that there's people are, of course, resistant to change, but then they're resistant to the idea sometimes of continuous change and of progress. And as we all know, if you work with a customer for an extended period of time, things change. Processes change, the internal resources change, people's roles change, and people have new ideas how they want to use things. And it's important to really keep up with all of those, improvements that are being made within an organization, or at least trying to be made. And it's one of those things. Like as I was saying, when I get on a call, sometimes I can tell this is someone who's implemented Salesforce before in another organization. They basically came in and now they're like, I know what I can do for you guys. You guys need Salesforce. And then they're the evangelists in that organization. They're the advocate. Not an easy position to be in, but oftentimes it can work. I mean, if you really have the vision, but it takes patience and it takes kind of that high level understanding. And I think that takes some people skills. It takes some understanding of psychology a little bit to be able to come in there and to make those suggestions and to say, hey, this is what you should do. But I mean, from a technical perspective, what if some of those projects look like? I guess implementations are one thing, but how about a big project that you've done for a customer internally or as a partner?
There's been mixed. So there's been some where, again, talking of greenfield implementations, companies just using Salesforce for the first time, replacing their old CRM system, whichever it might be, or sometimes even, replacing spreadsheets with a CRM system, and coming into Salesforce with expectations that, exactly like you said, they would think Salesforce would come and change the world. There've been more complicated ones as well, where there's integrations involved with other systems, the backend systems, the website, lead management, the whole complex mix, I guess. There's been quite a few. I think one of the trickiest ones, or the most challenging one, and again, that's had no implementation, that was just a discovery exercise that we did, which kind of went on for 6 months. It was challenging, but I would say I learned so much from it. And it was challenging because of the stakeholders, the people with their requirements specifically, how that they want even the discovery analysis to be, how much detail they wanted it to be, and how even with the wireframes, they would want it to show test data, but which is more realistic, to the finest minute detail. And that was a challenge because it's not just that we're kind of doing a discovery exercise to show them, right, as of when you get to implementation, this is how things will be done, but also presenting it back to the business itself was a challenge because we wanted them to understand things, how the user behavior would be, what the user experience would look like as of when they go live. And it wasn't just they wanted to see a more connected experience for their end users. What would a salesperson be using Salesforce like, or what would be, someone in the service team would be using it like, and what their day-to-day life would look like. So I think that was interesting because that's where we really created storyboards and showed the whole journey, how they would go from step A to step B and B to C, and how their, day would go literally. And that's got me into thinking like that as well now, since that discovery exercise that we've done 2 years ago, every project that I now take on, I'm like, right, how are we delivering demos? They need to be delivered in a particular style so the business can relate to it, You can't just deliver individual features and isolation and say, this is how it works, because people can't really connect things easily. They want to see how it would fit into their day-to-day life to make sense. And for that, you need to really create stories for them. It's like dealing with children in a way, but not to that, obviously, simplified level. But you do need to make things easier for people to understand. And I think as Salesforce professionals, what we sometimes underestimate is the knowledge or the familiarity that we have with like some of the terminologies. And because we're so used to it, we don't realize that not everyone's comfortable with the language. Like, we can say, yes, we can automate that, but instead some people would say, yes, we can create a flow for that. And that wouldn't fit with everyone, it just, not everyone would grasp, right, what a flow is, even if they know what a flow is. And so it's important to kind of, again, going back to the challenges and the technical details of the project, I think that's the project that even though there was no implementation involved, that discovery exercise itself was technical enough, complicated enough, and just gave me so much to learn as well.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about that also. I've worked with so many different types of organizations that use Salesforce, and some of them, because they have such a large IT department, I don't even want to call it a department, it's so much bigger than that. It's like an IT business, right, as part of the business. They, are going through these type of procedures. We can call it procurement procedures, but it's more than that. It's the discovery around, pre-procurement, and then everything after that. They have such rigorous procedures. And sometimes those procedures, it's like, wow, this is really good for us, right? And I'm saying this is an ISV, someone who's coming in with a solution for them. It's really good for us because it's going to allow us to have a really successful implementation. Then other times, those rigorous, procedures, we have to jump through all these hoops and there's all this red tape. It's actually totally counterproductive because it's actually a small solution. And really what they're looking for is, a little bridge between something or a small Band-Aid over a small cut rather than reworking everything. But every time they take on a new vendor or they bring in a new process, has to go through this giant thing. So it makes, a lot of the people involved in those processes very intimidated, is what I've seen internally, right? Like you'll have the person who they know they need a small solution, but they get so intimidated because they have to go through this whole process that sometimes say, we're just going to take it in-house. We're just going to do it in-house because we don't want to do all the discovery. We're just going to have, someone, make the Band-Aid themselves rather than take on the proper solution for what we want to do because it's just too much work. We know it's never going to get done. And a lot of times they need someone to be that partner and say, no, it's okay. We can go through procurement. We can do the user stories. We can talk to everyone and we can still try our best to meet your time frames and the time frame that your boss gave you, last Wednesday in the meeting when he started saying, we need this, that, and the other thing. And your boss doesn't even realize what actually has to happen for that to, take place in the organization.
Always need it yesterday. When you ask them what the timeline is, needed it yesterday. Should have been live by now. Always the case. Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned where, like the companies wanting to do things more in-house. One, because, they're kind of either avoiding those kind of discovery exercises or maybe the costs associated with it, because obviously everything has timelines and budget associated, which is understandable. But I think that's where a lot of the companies are making mistakes as well. Not necessarily that they should go for a consultancy or not. I think completely separate discussion, but you need to prepare for what you are about to do. I think even as a person in our day-to-day life, we have to plan our days. We have to get organized. We have to think about what we need to do today, wake up every morning. And when you think about implementing a whole system, it's surprising how companies just jump straight into it without much of a planning or without thinking, what the end goal is. And I've been involved in multiple projects before where they're implementing Salesforce or they're making other major changes in their systems, but it's not really aligned with where do they see the team to be, in a few years' time, or the company objectives. Like they're not aligned because they never thought about it. If the goals are to increase the sales by X percentage, how does that fit into the implementation of Salesforce? There's no connection between. And I think that's where that discovery exercise comes in. And that's a very, very important. Like before you even start implementing, you need to understand what needs to be done. Why does it need to be done? And then we'll talk about how. I think how comes much more towards the end. But if you don't know where your end goal is and why you're doing it, you can't really focus properly. And then I think by the time those systems are implemented, it then comes back to what value has the system brought, or has whatever that change is, what value has that change brought to the business? And quite often businesses are like, well, Salesforce cost us a lot, but it hasn't returned as much. Well, that's because you were not focusing on, getting a value back from the system. You just thought that this is a magic wand, you'll go live with it and things will change, but it doesn't work like that. So they do need to put in that planning time and, speak to the end users, understand what's needed, and that does then bring value as well.
Yeah, and I it's like the hype around Salesforce. Sometimes it seems like it's too good to be true, right? And especially when you then speak to someone who's like, "Oh my gosh, I spent so much money on Salesforce. We're trying to do anything we can to get rid of it. Like in a year from now, we're not going to be using it." And sometimes that does happen. Oftentimes in a year from now, they end up saying, "We actually hired another one person or two people to manage Salesforce because we made the decision we're going to keep it." But it's like if only there was an easy way to align those people who are so thankful that they have Salesforce in their organization with the ones who are still on the fence after 3 years. I mean, I'll talk to people and they're just like this. We just keep sinking money. We just keep sinking money. We just keep sinking money into. It's like, okay, well, what are you trying to accomplish there? Like, what's the end goal? Why do you keep just putting money into Salesforce if you don't understand what you're trying to get out of it? And oftentimes it's not so easy for them to answer that question, right? It's just, we're trying to automate this process. But also a lot of times these organizations, it's organizations that are just, they don't have a roadmap. They keep changing their leadership's making changes in decisions about how they're going to do things just too often. And then you end up with half-built processes here, half-built processes there, users who don't even really, the users for sure don't know why they're using Salesforce, right? It's for them, it's the least convenient because they're forced to use it. They don't, it's not really set up in an optimal way. It's just a big landscape. There's a lot of different types of people out there, a lot of different types of organizations, and we have to navigate it all, right? And that's part of the fun, I would say.
It is, absolutely. I mean, with end users as well, like I feel almost sad for end users because they quite often get ignored. Like no one asks them, what do you want from a new system? But they're the ones who are going to use it day to day.
Absolutely.
Don't go and ask, they should have been part of the interviews during the discovery session.
Yeah.
Their feedback should have been taken and onboarded, and whatever features and anything that was kind of planned or prioritized, as part of the implementation for Salesforce, all of that should have been kind of included in the foundation of the implementation. And even now, I think there's a lot of, especially in bigger organizations, this is easier to achieve in smaller places, smaller companies, but small to medium-sized businesses. But as we go on the enterprise level, this is even harder to kind of tackle as well, because it's not one team that you're involved with. There's multiple teams involved. Everyone gets to have a say, and everyone wants to justify their part of the job and show the results, which not necessarily always go in the favor of the end users or the team who will actually be using it. And I think that's where the organizations need to kind of step back a little bit and kind of align the teams, align the leadership, I guess, should be aligned before anything else. They should align themselves and understand exactly why they want Salesforce before they even go into the implementation of it. And that's, I feel like in my 15 years of experience, that's a major gap that's missing. That research exercise, that is not just discovery, but the research exercise that should be done in the beginning before you even think about implementation and how things will be implemented. You need to know why and what you're trying to change. And if you're not clear, the system or any change will not really bring the value that you're looking for.
I think that couldn't be more true. And yeah, just thinking about the different types of perspectives people have and the different organizations and the different ways they manage and run. Yeah, it can be a real journey just navigating, figuring out, who am I really dealing with? What's their relationship with software? What's their relationship with their end users? And I've made that same point before that you made, about the end users being totally forgotten. I think that it's, as a salesperson myself who uses Salesforce, I'm also a bit on the I'm on the admin side in terms of I understand, what's going on in Salesforce, and I work with the technical product. I kind of get the bridge between the two, and to be a Salesforce user is not always easy, and I'm always blown away when I get to speak to someone or see a demonstration of an org that's so built out so well for the users to use Salesforce. And as I once spoke with someone that said, Salesforce is my that's my tool. That's the main tool I use to get my job done. And let me show you how I do it. And he started showing me the things that he did in Salesforce. And it was so built out. It was so customized. You could tell so much work went into it. And it was a big organization. So, they maybe had the resources, but it was a huge, huge, huge investment. And it pays off when you're in there, when you're able to do everything. As a user, especially when you can, minimize click is huge, right? I know for some admins, they go, what's the big deal for someone to, go and convert a lead and then to, do the conversion and then fill in this information. It's like, well, if you could just map 3 more of those fields from one object to the other, yeah, it might take you a couple minutes, to build that out. It's not standard, whatever it may be, but it's going to save your users time. They're going to be happier. They're going to end up doing more work in Salesforce. They're going to get more data. It's going to contribute to the whole organization, but it's not always the top of the list, right? Sometimes it's, we just need to get rid of this other process. Let's port it over to Salesforce, which is great. It's great to think like that and to try to centralize the operations. But, like the way I talk about it in my demos of Titan, if someone comes with a very specific use case, I try my best not to do major feature dumping and just showing them every single thing I can do, because then what happens? They start going, oh, wow, this reminds me of another project. And as we know, that means a lot of times that no project gets done, right? In the quarter or in that half a year, or whatever it may be. The projects that they came for don't get done because start thinking about 10 other things. It's a real skill that I think is pretty common in the industry, but not everyone has it, which is that you really need to learn how to plan. You need to learn how to, map everything out. You need to learn how to make a roadmap and how to stick to it or how to alter it so that it actually serves the needs of everyone around you best.
I think people get overwhelmed as well, in exactly the example that you've given sometimes. And I don't know, I'm not a salesperson, I'm a professional, so I don't know how sales work. But again, even being a consultant, when you're dealing with businesses, stakeholders, people, again, there's leadership, even they get overwhelmed when you're talking about too many things all at the same time. Even if as a consultant you're giving them advice, I think that advice needs to be structured as well. And just, you need to almost like hold your breath and just sit on some of these things for some time until, the first few bits have been absorbed, and give it in a structure where you think it can be implemented or should be implemented in that way. And I think that does make a difference. I think if you throw way too many things all at once, businesses may even think that you're trying to make more money out of it, but also then they struggle with what to do first, because they don't necessarily have the same vision as yourself. Or, they would obviously think from the business perspective, which is great, but you need to align the business objectives with the tech objectives as well. And again, going back to the end users, I think another gap I see in the ecosystem at the moment where we do need more attention, especially even in consultancies, it's the user experience, like the UX UI design. Like, I still feel that it's not pushed enough as much as it should be. Mostly, like, again, talking about connected experience for the end user, that's still a major gap that's missing. For smaller companies, yes, it's a simple process, so it's okay. It doesn't make a huge kind of difference, but the more complicated the roles are for the end users, the more the UX UI design can kind of play into it and make the lives easier. But nobody's here thinking about making the life easier for the end user. Yeah. And they end up, feeling, there's so many end users that I've spoken with, and they would say, oh, I feel that we're just doing a bit of an admin job because we have to do so much data entry and we have to do this and we have to do this. And that's because no one really thought about how do we make their life easier to increase the productivity, which also, again, will feed into value that the system is bringing in, only if, you think about it like that.
Absolutely. Great. So, I think getting towards the end of our time here, but, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what you're excited for going forward in the future, if there's any trends you think people should be looking out for within the ecosystem or within Salesforce itself. And, yeah, tell us a little bit about where you're looking towards now that we're halfway through 2024.
I know time's flying, isn't it? I think where we're all going, pretty much everyone knows now, AI is kind of changing the world. I don't think it has been onboarded by the companies as much as it should have been by now. But I think, again, we touched on people being resistant on change. And so are we. Like, I don't know if you started using AI in your day-to-day job, just writing up emails, because we're a creature of habit, right? We've been writing our own emails for years.
Sure.
How do we just, change it or turn ourselves into something else? So it will take time, but I think that's the biggest thing to kind of overcome. And I think once that's there, it's going to change lives. I think that's going to be very, very different. And it's only a matter of a few years. I don't think it's very long. Data cloud on Salesforce side is another one again. The whole 360 view of a customer, all the systems being connected and easier access to data and information just to see a full 360 view of your customer. That itself is, I think, going to be a game changer. But again,
absolutely,
the adoption is probably slower than maybe what Salesforce expected. Again, just need to push it, and I guess it will take time for people to get comfortable with it as well. But yeah, I think in another couple of years, 2 or 3 years, things will be different.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely true, and it's an exciting time. I think everyone's kind of still waiting to see, everyone's kind of waiting to see what people are going to do with AI, but really we should all just be doing it and coming up with our own ideas. And, as I recently had something and I was like, it was the middle of the day and my brain was kind of fried out. And I said, well, I can't do this right now. And I said, you know what? Let me use AI as like my, study partner and it's just my brainstorming partner and help me with this task. And it made things so much easier. And then all of a sudden I was finished what I thought, would take me a day or I'd be putting off for 2 days. And I think that's, one of the big things is being able to approach some of the more daunting tasks a little bit easier because you've got that springboard. And then from an automation perspective, I mean, it's going to be amazing for Salesforce. And I know people are already using it and doing really cool things. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, no, I think things will be different. We just need to kind of get used to it as well, adopt it, and then talk about it, encourage people for it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Maria, this has been a really amazing pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining Salesforce Radio and looking forward to seeing you again in the future and having more of these conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Salesforce Radio. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting discussions, expert tips, and exclusive interviews with industry leaders. Stay connected with Titan, plus the power of the planet's leading CRM. See you next time.